The Senate Labor Committee is called to order. Today, we are getting a late start. I appreciate everybody's patience. We had a long floor session, and we have a couple of members who are participating in a press conference, a couple of members taking a little while to get here. But we're going to go ahead and get started to make sure that we get to all of the testimony, and then to also make sure that we have time for discussion and questions of our committee members. Today, members, we have the opportunity to hear presentations from two researchers on their reports on union avoidance activity in Minnesota's nursing homes. I understand that the two presentations are closely related to one another, so we plan to hear both presentations before opening it up to questions about the presentations themselves. We will then continue with our testifier list and then open it up for further discussion or questions of the presenters and testifiers. So first, we have the presentation of the two reports, and our presenters are Adam Reich, Professor of Sociology at Columbia University and co-director of the Columbia Labor Lab, and Teek Wiggin, Strategic Coordinator at Labor Lab and a PhD candidate in Sociology at Northwestern University. Welcome, both of you, to the Minnesota Senate Labor Committee. We're very pleased to have you.
Thank you so much, Chair McEwen, members of the committee. Thank you for having us. My name is Adam Reich, and I'm a professor of sociology at Columbia University. I've studied work and worker rights in the healthcare sector for approximately 20 years. I'm also the co-founder and co-director of the Columbia Labor Lab, an interdisciplinary center at the university that for the past 7 years has partnered with unions and other worker organizations on research to enhance the well-being of low-wage workers around the country. We currently have partnerships with organizations in Alabama, Washington State, California, New York City, and Minnesota. Our research center is nonpartisan but supportive of workers and worker organizing. We're well aware that our legitimacy, both in the academic world and the policy world, depends on generating gold standard academic research that stands up to scrutiny. And I'm looking forward to your scrutiny today. The report that I'd like to share with you is the result of a research project that the Columbia Labor Lab has been engaged in since 2021. In that year, we learned that SEIU Minnesota was embarking on an ambitious effort to transform the conditions of work for workers and conditions of care for residents in the state's long-term care sector. We saw this as a unique opportunity to understand the process by which workers come together in organizing campaigns and the obstacles they face when they do so. Our report focuses on pro-union workers' experiences during this multi-year statewide organizing effort. We document and characterize how workers experienced employers' strategies to resist worker unionization drives. This is a mixed methods study, meaning that we use different kinds of data at different levels of analysis to document these experiences. We interviewed workers involved in these campaigns. We made use of union administrative data about campaigns. The union also provided us with employer materials that were distributed during these campaigns. And finally, over the summer of 2024, we fielded an original survey to all 30,755 registered certifying nursing assistants in the state. It's a lot of people. And received responses from approximately 2,000. Individually, each of these methods is incomplete, but together they paint a fairly unambiguous story. We find a consistent pattern of employee opposition to union organizing. This has a chilling effect on worker organizing efforts. Many workers told us that they're afraid to speak up about working conditions in their homes because they fear retaliation for doing so. Moreover, we found that these patterns appear most often in facilities that rely heavily on public funding, which tend to have lower staffing levels and lower care quality. In other words, the nursing homes where working conditions are most challenging and where workers may most want a collective voice are also where management opposition to organizing is strongest. Because nursing homes depend heavily on Medicare and Medicaid, it raises an important public policy question about whether taxpayer dollars may indirectly be supporting union avoidance campaigns. So here's my outline for today. I'll begin with a bit of background, which many of those of you in this room are probably familiar with. In 1935, Congress passed the National Labor Relations Act, which established union elections as we know them today. Advocating for its passage, Senator Robert Wagner explained that the act seeks merely to make the worker a free man in the economic as well as the political field. Just as Americans had the right to elect their community representatives in government, coworkers ought to have the right to elect whether they want someone to represent them at work. If a majority of coworkers wants no union, that is their right. If a majority wants a particular union to represent them, that is also their right. If a majority wants, if the law gives the employer no vote in this, workers vote and decide. The law aims to create laboratory conditions in which the will of the majority of workers is measured and respected without interference from the employer. 90 years later, a robust academic literature has documented the ways in which the election framework established by the NLRA is broken and falls short of establishing the economic freedoms to which it aspired. Aside from the secret ballot, on nearly every other indicator of democratic process, from parties' equal access to voters, to parties' equal rights to speech, to parties' equal access to media, the NLRA, as currently practiced, fails to live up to the principles of American democracy. Employers have access to worker information in ways that workers and unions do not. They are allowed to speak in the workplace in ways that workers and unions cannot. And their hiring and firing power means that they are able to shape workers' preferences both explicitly and implicitly in ways that unions cannot. Such inequalities have grown more pronounced in recent decades as employers have grown increasingly aggressive and sophisticated in their attempts to prevent workers from forming unions, and as the penalties for violating election laws have weakened. In recent years, the environment has become so hostile to organizing in much of the private sector that unions have sometimes moved away from organizing industries altogether. The intensity of such efforts likely helps to explain a remarkable disparity between public opinion towards unions and actual rates of unionization. While public approval of unions has never been higher, averaging around 70% over the last 5 years, private sector unionization rates hover at a little bit below 6%. So I'm now going to review 2 anti-union campaigns in Minnesota nursing homes. These are 2 very different facilities, and so I want to give you sort of a picture of what workers face when they try to organize unions at different kinds of facilities. Facility A is a senior living facility on the outskirts of Minneapolis with approximately 30 long-term care beds. A faith-based nonprofit system runs the facility. Workers at Facility A filed for a union election in the winter of 2022. Although union elections are typically scheduled to occur within 60 or 90 days of the filing date, management at Facility A challenged the bargaining unit, which led to delays in the election. In the 3 months between filing and election, managers waged an aggressive and multifaceted anti-union campaign on the shop floor. This included posters around the facility, gift baskets to employees, and letters both to workers and to residents and their families. We see signs like this hung around the facility telling workers that a union takes away their right to speak for themselves about wages, benefits, and working conditions, that they should vote no. We see memoranda to workers telling them, asking them to vote no, that a union would not be in their interest. We see gift baskets to workers, trying to encourage them to feel good about their managers in the lead up to the union election. And we see letters to residents and their families arguing against unionization and encouraging residents and their families to let workers know that a union would not be in their interests. The substance and duration of this campaign likely created the conditions under which the union lost the election. Facility B, on the other hand, is a large, approximately 300-bed facility located outside Minneapolis, run by a for-profit company which itself is part of a larger private equity group. Workers at Facility B have been engaged in an effort to form a union since the summer of 2022. They first filed for a union election that fall, then withdrew their petition in the face of an anti-union campaign. They filed again in early 2025, but in the face of a renewed and similarly aggressive anti-union campaign, filed blocking charges with the National Labor Relations Board, and the election has been postponed indefinitely. At Facility B, an assistant director of nursing approached a CNA and asked her to lead an anti-union petition drive, telling her that she was good at convincing people or could do it easily. The worker successfully collected 80 signatures from her coworkers on the anti-union petition, and after the union withdrew, the director of nursing gave the worker $500 in gift cards and a raise. During both campaigns, both in 2022 and in 2025, the CEO of the health system flew to Minnesota from out of state to tell workers that the union was not in their interest. In the 2025 case, he told them he was upset and angry and disappointed that workers were continuing to organize. The facility held one-on-one meetings with many in the facility. In one, the assistant director of nursing told a leader that the facility had planned to give workers raises that spring, but that the union election made such raises impossible. In another private meeting, a worker reported that the assistant director threatened to tell her pastor about her union activities, since the worker attended the same church as that assistant director. We can generalize beyond these cases by looking at the full population of union organizing campaigns in which Healthcare Minnesota was involved between 2021 and 2025. At the conclusion of every campaign, organizers fill out an end-of-campaign report in which they're asked a range of questions about the campaign, including questions about their awareness of the employer's use of different anti-union tactics. Between 2021 and 2025, organizers from Healthcare Minnesota had initial meetings with workers from 19 separate nursing homes. At 13 of these homes, the union established an organizing committee, which is often a second step towards a union election. We report the rate at which different types of union activity was reported across these campaigns. In this graph, we see these reported rates conditional on just that first worker meeting. And in the second graph, we see these rates conditional on an organizing committee having been established. And these figures demonstrate both the breadth and depth of union avoidance tactics in Minnesota nursing homes. Organizers reported that employers suspended or fired workers in well over half of all organizing efforts, conducted captive audience meetings in approximately half of all organizing efforts, and gave gifts and favors to workers in exchange for workers not supporting the union in approximately 20% of all efforts. So above, we've reviewed the recent evidence of employer anti-union activity across a range of Minnesota nursing homes, but this doesn't capture the entirety of the effect of union avoidance activity on worker sentiments. First, employer union avoidance activity often occurs preemptively, outside of any union organizing taking place. And second, this union avoidance activity has a chilling effect on workers beyond the specific facilities in which it occurs, making many workers afraid to consider organizing at all. To get a better sense of employer anti-union activities across all Minnesota nursing homes, finally, in July and August of 2024, we fielded a survey to all registered CNAs in the state of Minnesota, which we obtained these names and contact information through a Freedom of Information Act request and contracted with a professional survey research firm to recruit participants and conduct the survey. This process was designed to avoid bias in response by, for example, taking the name Columbia Labor Lab out of the recruitment materials. Of the registered CNAs, a little less than 7% completed the survey. Respondents identified the facilities where they worked, choosing from a pre-populated drop-down menu, and we used these selections to match respondents to their facilities' administrative data, which we acquired through the U.S. Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services and Minnesota's Department of Health. In one question, the survey asked respondents to estimate the percentage of their coworkers who supported unions. Another question asked respondents to report whether they were aware of a range of union avoidance tactics being used within their workplace, which we aggregated into a 4-point index. Specifically, CNAs were asked whether the employer had held group meetings about unionization, whether they had distributed anti-union materials, whether they had held one-on-one meetings with employees about unions, and whether they had hired a consultant to dissuade employees from unionizing. We find a strong, positive, and significant association between respondents' reports of anti-union activity within their facilities and that facility's reliance on public money, as indicated by the percentage of resident revenue for that facility that comes from government sources like Medicare and Medicaid. This relationship is demonstrated visually here. We divide the homes into 20 bins based on facilities' share of revenue from public funding. Each point then shows the average level of public funding for that bin along the horizontal or x-axis, and the average level of reported anti-union behavior on the vertical axis or y-axis. At higher levels of public funding, reports of union avoidance behavior are also higher. Now, this relationship is likely explained by the fact that these homes that rely most on public funding are also those homes in which support for unionization is highest, and where there may be nascent unionization campaigns. The next figure illustrates the relationship between public funding, again on the x-axis, and union support, which is positive and significant. And then finally, higher support for unions in these homes may be explained by the fact that homes with higher levels of public funding are also more likely to serve residents who previously spent down their assets and are now poor. And so these facilities are most likely to have worse working conditions and worse conditions of care. This figure illustrates the relationship between public funding, again on the x-axis, and staffing levels. So there is a negative association between the percentage of resident revenue coming from public funding and levels of staffing per resident within a facility. And finally, this slide shows, again, public funding on the x-axis and CMS care quality ratings on the y-axis. In all these cases, there's a strong negative correlation between public funding and ratings. Together, these figures suggest that those facilities that disproportionately rely on public transfers for revenue tend to be short-staffed, worse in terms of quality of care, and possibly as a response have higher worker demand for unions. In response, these disproportionately public-funded facilities seem to be engaging in more anti-union behavior to thwart organizing efforts. So, the case studies presented here illustrate the obstacles faced by direct care nursing home workers attempting to exercise their legal rights to form unions in their workplaces. The examples are drawn from facilities that vary both in size and ownership type, but show a consistent repertoire of union avoidance tactics. Management delayed elections, shared misleading information, applied pressure both individually and in groups, and in some instances mobilized residents and their families to advocate against the union. Further research, of course, is warranted. Longitudinal studies linking worker survey data to facility-level administrative and financial records would help to identify causal relationships between anti-union activity, staffing, and quality of care. Further ethnographic and qualitative research would illuminate how the threat of retaliation circulates across the sector, inhibiting worker organizing in facilities untouched by active union campaigns. But the evidence we present here today, I think, paints a fairly unambiguous portrait of the existence of anti-union practices and their effects on workers in Minnesota nursing homes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentation. For those who have just joined us, we are going to go ahead and have our presentations by our guests today, and then we have a couple of testifiers, and after that we'll open it up for questions and discussion. And so we'll proceed to Teek Wiegand. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm trying to hook my computer up right now. Oh. Took a little while last time, so let's okay. Chair McEwen, members of the committee, my name is Teek Wiegand, and I'm a researcher at Labor Lab. Labor Lab is different than Adam's Labor Lab. We don't have a space between labor and lab, so we're a different organization. A little confusing, but Labor Lab is a workers' rights watchdog that tracks and researches union busters. I'm also a PhD candidate at Northwestern. It's been studying union busting for the last 5 years. I'm here to present a study that Labor Lab recently conducted on the estimated costs of anti-union campaigns at 5 nursing homes across Minnesota. But first, I'd like to provide some background on Labor Lab and the origins of this report. One of Labor Lab's major roles is to track the disclosures that anti-union consultants are required to file when they are hired to counter organizing drives. Compliance with the law requiring these disclosures is famously abysmal, and few people, even in the labor movement, know they exist, let alone how to access them. This is an issue we've documented extensively in past reports. So when we notice new disclosures in which consultants often report hourly rates of $500 an hour or more, we seek to put them in the hands of workers as the law intended. That's why we reached out to SEIU Healthcare Minnesota and Iowa in late 2025 when we noticed a consultant had filed a disclosure reporting that a nursing home, specifically Chapel View Homes, had hired consultants to prosecute its anti-union campaign. In addition to flagging the disclosure for SEIU, we also provided an estimate of the full cost of the union busting campaign. We provide these estimates based on the same logic as the consultant disclosures. Workers deserve to know if the anti-union messaging and tactics that they are subjected to reflect the organic views and actions of their employer and supervisors, or if they are actually the work of exorbitantly paid specialists who draw on a playbook designed by industrial psychologists to sow fear and doubt about unionization, and whose lineage goes back to the Pinkertons. Also implicit in the law is that workers deserve a sense of how much their employer is spending to convince them not to unionize. And that's the logic of our estimates. SEIU Healthcare responded to our outreach by asking us to explain the calculations behind the estimate. And we decided to respond in turn by not only providing a breakdown of that estimate, but a report with estimates on 4 other similar campaigns that we were aware of. SEIU Healthcare then encouraged us to present that report at this hearing. So that's why I'm here. With that background in mind, I now will provide an overview of the study. Due to a lack of transparency, we emphasize that these are only estimates, but we've done our best to make them as accurate as possible, and we hope they shed light on the full range of costs that nursing homes incur when they choose to resist unionization. If nothing else, we hope to call the committee's attention to the spending reports filed by nursing home operators that reveal that they have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on union busters, and to make clear to the committee that this spending is only the tip of the iceberg, given loopholes in the disclosure requirements, rock bottom compliance rates, and a range of other very large additional costs that never go reported. We base the estimates of this study on the disclosures mentioned, court records, manuals written by anti-union consultants, including a consultancy that was actually involved in one of these campaigns, also previous scholarly research, and our domain knowledge and past analyses of this sort of data. Our sources and assumptions are laid out clearly in the report. There were 7 costs that we examined in the report. These were split between external and internal costs. The external costs were spending on consultants, attorneys, and materials and administrative fees associated with their work. The spending numbers on consultants in our estimates are beyond doubt because, as you can see here, these are numbers that the nursing homes and consultants reported themselves. As for the internal costs, these were the paid time of managers, supervisors, and workers that was eaten up by anti-union activities and the productivity losses that tend to arise from the tension and distraction fueled by anti-union campaigns and the negative impact on morale. For managers and supervisors, this paid time is spent on campaign coordination, strategy meetings, coaching on anti-union messaging, assessments and report backs of workers' perceived union support, and group and one-on-one meetings with workers. Anti-union manuals, including one written by the consultancy involved in one of these campaigns, as I mentioned, note that an anti-union campaign becomes a full-time job for the in-house campaign leadership team, and that the vigorous participation of supervisors in a campaign is vital to success, and that supervisors who do not fully buy into a campaign should be terminated. The lost paid time of workers is lost primarily to anti-union one-on-one and group meetings with supervisors. Factoring in all these costs, we estimate that each of the 5 campaigns cost the employer between about $140,000 and $400,000, depending on the campaign. That worked out to anywhere from nearly $9,700 per worker for our upper estimate of the most expensive campaign to $1,600 per worker for our lower estimate of the cheapest campaign. These amounts were equivalent to anywhere between a 3.5% and 20% wage increase for the targeted workers, assuming an average wage of $20 an hour and a 35-hour work week. Here's an example of one of our estimate breakdowns that you can examine in the report. We want to emphasize that in every case, these nursing homes could have avoided incurring virtually all of these costs by taking an alternative approach. One that was once very common in the U.S. in the past is becoming more common in the U.S. again, and is current practice in much of Canada. That is, these nursing homes could have agreed to voluntarily recognize and bargain with the union if the union provided verifiable proof of majority support. In fact, we think our report demonstrates that some nursing homes might have saved money, at least in the medium term, by taking this approach and agreeing to significant wage increases in a first contract rather than fighting the union. In other words, we think taking the high road would actually have been cheaper, all things considered, in some cases, which is something you can rarely say about a high road approach. I'll now summarize the estimated costs of each of these campaigns, and then I'll zoom in on 2 cases. We estimate that Chapel View Homes anti-union campaign in 2025 cost between $404,000 and $280,000. That's equivalent to between roughly an 8% and 5% wage increase for the targeted workers. This estimate includes $125,000 that the nursing home itself reported spending on consultants. We estimate that Northridge Health and Rehab's campaign in 2022 cost between $384,000 and $306,000, or between $3,500 and $2,800 per worker, equivalent to between about a 10%, 8% wage increase. This estimate includes $188,000, or $89,000, that the nursing home itself reported spending on anti-union consultants. We estimate the same nursing home's anti-union campaign in 2025, so there was a second organizing attempt and then a second anti-union campaign, that campaign cost between $249,000 and $154,000. Breaks down to between a 6% and 4% wage increase. We estimate that the Folkestone anti-union campaign in 2022 cost between $408,000 and $208,000, ultimately equivalent to between a 10% and 20% wage increase. On top of that estimated spending, a consultant reported receiving an additional $211,000 from Presbyterian Home Services, which owns Folkestone and was listed with a Roseville, Minnesota address. This was for services rendered after that campaign ended. Finally, we estimate that Glen Oaks Senior Living's anti-union campaign in 2023 costs between $238,000 and $139,000, breaks down to between 9 and 5% wage increase. Now, I'll give you a closer look at the dynamics and some actors at play in two of these campaigns. First, we'll look at the anti-union campaign at Chapel View Homes. Chapel View Homes hired 2 anti-union consultants on October 25th in 2025 to counter an organizing drive by SEIU Healthcare. The employer also hired at least 2 outside attorneys to provide legal representation and probably campaign advice as well. The union filed an election petition in early November, and workers voted 59-50 in favor of unionization on December 12th. Our upper estimate of $404,000 for this campaign breaks down into the following 7 costs, as shown here in that pie chart. $125,000 in payments to consultants. That number was reported by Chapel View Homes. $98,000 in estimated attorney costs. $67,000 in paid time spent by the in-house campaign team on planning and directing the campaign, one-on-one and group meetings with workers and supervisors and other anti-union activities. $16,000 in paid supervisor time lost to some of the same activities, including regularly assessing and reporting back the union sentiments of their subordinates. And we know these tactics are used because these consultancies use a prepackaged playbook. 2 additional costs, $39,000 in paid worker time lost to anti-union group and one-on-one meetings, and $48,000 in productivity loss due to the tension, distraction, negative impact on morale that typically results and that tends to reduce output per hour. These are the costs for our upper estimate, $404,000. Our lower estimate was $280,000. For context, I also want to provide a little background on the anti-union consultants and attorneys involved. The 2 consultants involved in this campaign, Don Chapman and Michael McNally, have also both union busted for Amazon, and they routinely fail to meet their reporting requirements under the Labor Management Reporting Standards Act. For example, one habitually fails to disclose their pay rates on required disclosure forms, and both haven't filed their mandatory annual spending reports in recent years or ever. Public records suggest Chapman's consultancy is based in Florida and McNally is based in Delaware, and these consultants often bill for travel time. The 2 attorneys of record who represented Chapel View were Christopher Chantry of Larkin Hoffman and Joseph Nierenberg of Nierenberg Employment Law. Larkin Hoffman touts services including advising employers on, quote, how to remain union-free, unquote. Joseph Nierenberg, meanwhile, touts a network of partner consultants, quote, who have expertise other than law, end quote, including industrial psychology and employee coaching. So here we had a campaign where managers, non-attorney consultants, and attorneys operated in tandem to union bust at Chapel View. As mentioned, we estimate that Chapel View's campaign costs anywhere from $2,800 to $1,900 per worker, equivalent to between roughly an 8 and 5% wage increase. Despite this investment in union avoidance, Chapel View's workers still voted to unionize. If Chapel View had chosen to voluntarily recognize the union, it could have allocated those resources to cover a significant wage increase in a first contract with the union, a contract that I know is currently under negotiations. Instead, those resources were wasted on union busting. Now we're just going to look at a campaign waged in 2022 by Folkestone, which is owned by Presbyterian Homes and Services. This campaign looked a little different based on the information that's publicly available. SEIU filed an election petition in late June 2022. In response, Folkestone spent heavily on at least 3 attorneys with the law firm Fellhaber Larson, but does not appear to have hired non-attorney consultants, at least did not disclose doing so. While Folkestone waged an anti-union campaign in the workplace under the guidance of Fellhaber Larson, it also delayed the scheduling of an election by 2.5 months. It did so by challenging the bargaining unit, which is a very expensive legal tactic, as union busters themselves have said in their writings. The NLRB ultimately rejected Folkestone's challenge to the bargaining unit, but the damage was done. With 56 workers eligible to vote, 46 workers voted 36-10 against unionization on June 28th, nearly 13 weeks after the election petition was filed. This lopsided vote against the union suggests that the delays and the employer's heavy investment in union avoidance turned what had been a strong majority support for the union into small minority support, and that's because unions only file for elections when they have strong majority support because of these anti-union campaigns. And so that is what can happen when an employer spends hundreds of thousands of dollars on third-party professionals to delay an election and buy itself much more time to sow fear, doubt, and a sense of futility about the value of unionization. One second. Just finding that last slide here. This is the slide. So we hope this report has conveyed the huge hidden costs that nursing homes, which are subsidized by taxpayer dollars, are choosing to incur by making it as difficult as possible for their workers to gain a collective voice over their working conditions. We want to emphasize again that this is only the very tip of the iceberg. As I understand it, a great many nursing home workers in Minnesota have been organizing to try to improve their working conditions and their ability to provide proper care to their patients. Given what we know about resistance of nursing homes and employers in general to unionization, we know that this means that many nursing homes have been investing a great deal of resources in preventing these workers from succeeding. Further, our report also underscores that when nursing homes really want to find money and resources, they often do, and much of that money could have gone to workers rather than lining the pockets of out-of-state consultants. In closing, we want to reiterate that there remains considerable uncertainty about these costs, besides the hard numbers reported by the employers themselves, and we hope that the committee will consider using its powers to investigate the issue further in order to find the truth out for themselves and for the public as a whole. This would provide a public service not only to the people of Minnesota, but also to the entire country. There's never been a formal investigation of all of these costs, even for industries that are highly subsidized by the government. But as we hope this report has made clear, such an investigation is long overdue. Thanks.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to go ahead and before we have our discussion and ask questions, I know we have a lot of questions for you both. We also have two testifiers here today, and so I'm going to ask if those two people could first present your testimony to the committee, and then just to make sure we don't run out of time. I first have Cassandra Warren. Please, welcome to the Senate Labor Committee. If you would please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Yes. Hello, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Cassandra Thomas. I have been in a nursing home worker since 1994. I work as a CNA, TMA. I have been at my current employer, Chapel View, for a couple of years, over 2 stints. To start, I want you all to know that I love being with my residents and doing this work. I know that I have the ability, patience, and passion needed to care for our residents. Many people don't have these skills, and many people aren't cut out for this work. This job is hard, but it's especially hard right now because we are so often working short with very high workloads. It is very frustrating to be short-staffed. Imagine working from 7 people to care for to 12. How can we do that well? It means more work on our bodies. We can't spend time with people we will want to. That means less care for our residents. That may mean they don't get their teeth brushed or other care, or we feel rushed. It's no way to live. We all know this isn't fair. And when this happens, residents and families get mad at, yell at us, curse at us. It isn't because we don't care. It's because we are working short. I got hurt because we were short, and management didn't communicate what was supposed to happen. I ended up hurting my arm and moving a resident, and now I am temporarily light work. This happened to so many of us. In addition to all of this, we also deal with low pay. As the cost of life goes up and up, but we have to fight to get a dime extra per hour. It isn't fair for the hard work we do. We lost so many good people because of these conditions. That's why last year, following a few long-term staff leaving, getting fired, we decided to form a union at my home. We felt like management wasn't listening to us. We were sick of the unfair treatment. We wanted higher pay so we could address the understaffing. Almost right away, we had over 2/3 of the group sign our petition saying we wanted a union. It was great. Then we walked into the management office and we said, most of us want a union. Right away, we saw some small changes from them for a little bit. But then the pushback started. They had a lady who came in every day, and then they had a town hall that barely anyone showed up for. All waste of money. They brought in food, snacks. Even though no one showed up to their meetings, because we knew what they was doing. What a waste of money. They brought in a lady from a town home, from out of town, I guess, paying for her hotel and food, I guess. More waste of money. The lady was actually nice, very nice. But I kept wondering, why was she out on the floor talking to us? She just kept saying bad stuff about the unions. She said the union won't work for us. She said we have paid the union bills. I kept wondering, who's paying her bills? During our vote, they came out on the floor telling us to vote no. They put up posters all around. They kept mentioning how much the union will cost us. What I want to know is how much did all this cost them instead of getting us the raise? They kept pulling us into one-on-one meetings. They did that to me, who had been a union steward. They didn't know. In a past job, I knew I was strongly pro-union, which made me wonder what they were saying to the other people. It was so frustrating to hear how much they spent to try to stop us. This all happened while we was working short. They could have spent that money on staff to care for our residents. How is this okay? On election day, I voted the first thing in the morning because I was excited to vote. That night, we won the union. The people flipped their votes because they were scared. They were scared. I would love to know where all that money goes. We work short all the time. Where that money go? I don't know. Residents need more staff, but their owners have money for this.
Ma'am, I'm really sorry to interrupt you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Can you please wrap up, though, because we have one more testifier, and then I want to make sure that our members have an opportunity to ask questions of the
Okay, I'm just
presenters.
about done.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. It seems to me management doesn't care about short staffing. They basically Nike, telling us just do it. But it isn't possible with what we have. We are doing the best we can, but we also need to have a living. To the politicians, do you know where the money is going? You are sending to the industry? When I hear in the news you are funding the nursing homes, should the money go to the employees who care for the residents? How much money you send is going to the right stuff? Because as a worker, I can tell you, I feel like it's getting to us. I hope you take the issue seriously and work to make sure nursing home workers are in the residents, making sure the workers in the residents in Minnesota are given what they need. Sometimes you love, or maybe you will be someone you love, or maybe you will be the one that in the homes. We want there to be enough staff. You want the money going to the workers who make sure your loved ones have dignity. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And last, we have Bernie Burnham, President of the Minnesota AFL-CIO. Welcome. Welcome back to the Senate Labor Committee.
Good afternoon, yes. Good afternoon, Chair McEwen and members of the committee. As you heard, my name is Bernie Burnham. I'm the president of our Minnesota AFL-CIO, Minnesota's Federation of Unions representing about 1,000 locals and roughly 300,000 workers in every corner of our state. I'm here this afternoon to share why, for workers, it's beneficial to be a union member. To be part of a collective voice gives people strength and pride. Standing up with your colleagues is powerful. Our country benefits from union labor. When workers are part of a union, they can work together to make improvements in their workplace. Improvements such as being able to negotiate and enforce a contract with management that guarantees things like higher wages, affordable health care, safer workplaces, job security, and a stable schedule. When communities have workplaces with unions, it raises the standard of living for more than just union members. It raises the standard of living for the entire community. Unions work to improve rights for all working people. The union difference is clear. 75% of workplaces where there is a union provide health insurance. 70% of those who belong to a union participate in guaranteed pension plans. Union members earn roughly $203 more per week than their non-union counterparts. This is just a sampling of why it's better in a union. In 2023, our Nursing Homes Workforce Standards Board was created by this legislature. It was the right thing to do. The board was tasked with adopting rules to establish minimum nursing home employment standards that are reasonably and necessary and appropriate to protect the health and welfare of nursing home workers, to ensure nursing home workers are properly trained about and fully informed of their rights under the law. Prior to this, workers were not treated fairly, and it sounds like that's continuing today. The Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board has improved the quality of life for the employees who we trust to take care of our loved ones. Improving their lives also improves the care and treatment for clients in nursing homes. Trying to take away the rights these workers have earned and organized for is simply said, union busting. In our great state, this is unacceptable. It is shameful, and I implore you to bring an end to these egregious activities. Pay the workers what they deserve and treat them with the dignity and respect they deserve. Workers' rights are residents' rights too. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. And now, if we could please have our former presenters come back to the podium, Mr. Reich and Mr. Wiggin, or Dr. Reich. Welcome back. And I know that I have a couple of questions, but I will first see if any of our members on the committee wanted to offer any commentary or thoughts, or if you have any specific questions for our presenters today. Yes, Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak to all the caregivers out there, the work that you do, that you are greatly appreciated, and the testifier did a great job. Thank you for the work that you do, because it's very, very important to care for the most vulnerable. As far as questions, I'm actually going to talk to you guys afterwards, because I don't want to run short of time, but I'm not going to have any questions until later, so I'll let you ask the question.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I was pretty shocked at how much was spent on the anti-union activities, and how frustrating for workers when that money could have been spent on a raise for them or hiring more workers to ease the workload. It just seems so wasteful. And when, workers are just trying to have a voice in their workplace, which is a long tradition in our society and our culture. Thank you for your research and your presentations, and thank you as well to everyone who came here to listen today.
Thank you, Senator. I'll go ahead then and ask a couple of questions that I have about the research. I was also really taken with the amount that was spent. I guess I wasn't surprised, but it is helpful just to see it laid out in that way, all of the money that goes into doing that, and then also the understanding then that in the way that those many of these centers are funded, in as much as they receive these public monies, this taxpayer dollars, that then in essence we are as a people funding union busting with our money, which I think that the more, especially in the state of Minnesota, which has a long, proud labor history, I think a lot of people would be really upset and shocked to learn about. So that's something that I want to dive into a little bit more. But I wonder if, is it Dr. Reich, or Mr. Reich, sorry.
Either way is fine.
I wonder, you had your team in doing the research that you did, interviewed a lot of workers. I wonder if you could share with us some of the particular stories or incidents that really stuck out to you. And I wonder also if you could speak a little bit to this sense of the power imbalance that occurs between an employer and employee. And here at the legislature, we're involved in debate all the time. We had a lot of vigorous debate on the floor today. And I think, though, that sort of debate has a very different character and a very different feel than a worker who has to sort of be faced with an employer, the person who is paying them and allowing them to be able to afford their life or not, and then having to negotiate with that employer or deal with them, trying to argue with them about something like joining a union or not. I wonder if you could just speak to those points a little bit for us, help us get our heads around that.
Yeah, thank Chair McEwen and members of the committee. There are many stories that come to mind. I think that the worker testimony that came to mind first was actually from the first campaign that I described, in which the administration sent letters to residents and families telling them to put pressure on workers to not support the union. And I think that I don't want to speak for healthcare workers. There are many in this room who could speak to it better than I could. But I think that many workers care deeply about their relationships with their residents. And so when residents are telling them that they ought to be ashamed of themselves for supporting the union, for example, in some ways that's even more I mean, certainly there's a power imbalance between the employer and the worker, and the fact that that workers could lose their job at will for pretty much any reason means that workers do feel quite a lot of fear when they're being told by their employer not to organize. But I think that in some ways it's when, from the story that comes to mind is of a worker who talked about how hurtful it was when a resident came to them telling them how they felt betrayed by the worker supporting a union. And I think that the idea that workers would feel like they were doing something wrong when they were advocating for themselves and advocating for their residents for better conditions of care, which are also better conditions of work, I think that that is sort of the undercurrent of a lot of worker testimonies. This feeling of like advocating for themselves and their coworkers for better pay, better conditions of work, that feels like they're doing something wrong, and that I think is what comes across in many of the worker testimonies.
Thank you for that. And it also struck me in your presentation, the recounting of the instance where someone in management had told an employee that they were going to tell their pastor or their religious leader that they were involved in union organizing. And it made me think about some of the sort of psychological manipulation that can happen when people are trying to organize. I worked years ago at a food cooperative and as a younger person, and the workers at that time were trying to organize, and I can remember one of the management people using sort of an emotional, like, appeal to all of us, like to make us feel bad that we were trying to organize, that we were trying to organize, somehow it was a personal insult toward her. And that's just very minor compared to the stories. I cannot even imagine what that would be like to have a management person say that they were going to go report you somehow for some, and it goes to what you're saying, I think, this idea of that making workers feel as if they're doing something wrong by advocating for themselves and their coworkers and their clients, the people that they're serving. Thank you for that. I do have a question for Mr. Wiggin as well. And I wish that we had more time, because I feel like I would love to delve into this, and maybe this is for a future hearing, but I would love to delve into the differences a little bit more between the publicly funded care facilities that are nonprofits, maybe run by a religious institution, and then when these other examples where we see private equity now owning large numbers, and I would love to suss that out, and I don't think we probably have time for that. But I am wondering, the cases that you studied were a pretty small amount. In your estimation, can we extrapolate those results to as sort of having a general understanding of what is happening in the state of Minnesota and beyond?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's pretty common for employers to hire anti-union consultants, whether those are non-attorney consultants or attorneys. So we can safely generalize that kind of spending to your typical campaign. There are plenty of studies that have found, 70% or more of employers hire consultants. I think it's usually between 75 and 90%. So this is very common. And I guess one other thing I'd add is you're not going to see this disclosed a lot because compliance with disclosure requirements is so bad, but also because of this loophole. It's called the advice loophole, where if you don't speak to workers directly as a consultant and you're only operating behind the scenes, then you don't have to disclose being paid. And that happens all the time, especially with healthcare providers. We've found through leaks and direct contact with campaigns that you'll have, maybe two persuaders, as they're called, people speaking directly to workers. And then you'll have one or two consultants in the background who are sort of monitoring the union sentiment of everyone, strategizing, coaching the supervisors. And we have no idea how often that happens, except that it happens a lot.
And are there consequences for not making these disclosures? Are there supposed to be and they're just not being enforced, or is it an absence of an enforcement mechanism?
There are supposed to be, and there can even be criminal penalties technically, but the law has just been horribly enforced for so long. Office of Labor Management Standards is highly underfunded, so that's part of what's going on. But they are supposed to launch investigations when complaints are filed that, you know, there's a union buster who has not filed one of these disclosures. Unfortunately, I'll also say a shortcoming of the law is, or at least the way these consultants operate, is maybe they file the disclosure, but they file it after the election has taken place, such that the information is almost useless at that point. So that's all too common.
Thank you, and we have to wrap up, but I guess I would just like to ask both of you if you have specific ideas for recommendations here at the state level in the state of Minnesota. We have our Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board that we've created. Do you have specific policy recommendations for us at the state level that we should be pursuing or at least looking into at this point, or do you have any final thoughts also that you'd like to share with us?
I do think a takeaway from our study is that hundreds of thousands of dollars that is being spent on attorneys and consultants could go into the pockets of workers instead if nursing homes agreed to voluntarily recognize unions upon verifiable proof of majority support, or at least if they adopted neutrality, then that money would be saved and could go to workers. And I don't understand why that, wouldn't be a fair solution, especially in light of the fact that we're talking about a highly publicly subsidized industry.
Thank you.
Chair McEwen and the committee, my takeaway, I think similar to Mr. Wiggins, is both the extent of anti-union activity in these homes, but also the fact that we find this association between public funding, public money, and anti-union practice. I don't have any clear policy recommendation. That wasn't our intention in conducting the research, but I do think it's worth looking into whether, as you say, public money in the state of Minnesota is being spent on thwarting workers' organizing efforts. That seems deeply problematic in a state that I know cares quite a lot about the integrity of public funding.
Well, I thank you both so much, and thank you to our testifiers today who came to share their experience and all of the work that they did to organize with their coworkers and also President Burnham. Thank you very much for this hearing. We're going to keep looking at this, and when we were made aware of this report, I feel it's a kind of a bombshell of information for us to take in the state of Minnesota, to realize that extent of union busting is happening right here in our state, just as a whole. And then you add the layers of the taxpayer money and the ways that it's being done, the extent of the expenses being incurred. It's a huge issue for us to dive into. So thank you very much for the presentation, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And with that, the Senate Labor Committee is adjourned.